What if the person you trusted to care for your child turned out to be the very one causing them harm? Every day, the lunchbox I packed with love disappeared. No crumbs, no wrappers, no trace. My daughter, Lena, only 9, would come home from school pale and exhausted. Not the lively little girl I once knew. And when she did, she made a beeline for the kitchen, devouring anything she could find like she hadn't eaten in days. At first, I thought maybe she was just growing. Kids do that. But one afternoon, I decided to check her backpack. Everything was there, books, pencil case, everything except the lunchbox. "Where's your lunch, sweetie?" I asked gently. Lena froze, gripping her backpack straps. I lost it," she muttered. Again, I frowned. "How do you lose it every day?" She didn't answer, just stared at the floor, her little fists clenched. That's when I knew. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The next morning, instead of driving off after dropping her off at Willow Creek Primary, I parked across the street and waited. When the lunch bell rang, I approached the school quietly, heart pounding. I found a low window near her classroom and crouched behind a bush. What I saw shook me to my core. While other children laughed and opened their colorful lunchboxes, Lena sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, eyes down. And, at the front of the classroom, Miss Hargrave, her homeroom teacher, sat casually at her desk with Lena's lunchbox in front of her. She peeled it open, sniffed the sandwich I had made, and took a big bite, like it was hers. Lena didn't move. Miss Hargrave scooped out the yogurt, ate the fruit, and finally popped the chocolate into her mouth. She looked content. Then she leaned forward and whispered something to Lena. I couldn't hear it through the window, but I saw my daughter's face fall. She nodded slightly, like she'd done this before. I was so angry. I wanted to burst into that classroom and confront her. But I held back, knowing it wouldn't help. I needed proof. Real proof, not just suspicion. Proof that would expose Miss Hargrave for who she truly was. That night I barely slept. I replayed the scene over and over in my head. The coldness of Miss Hargrave as she ate Lena's lunch. How Lena didn't even protest. How could she? She was just a little girl, scared and alone. The next morning, I packed Lena's lunch as usual: chicken sandwich, fresh fruit, yogurt, and a chocolate square. But this time, I added something else. A tiny hidden camera tucked into the lid of the lunchbox. I adjusted it carefully, making sure it would capture everything once the box was opened. That afternoon, when Lena got home, I took her backpack before she could say a word. My hands were trembling as I rushed to my computer, slid the memory card in, and pressed play. The footage was clearer than I'd hoped. Lena sitting silently at her desk, staring at the wall, her lunchbox untouched. And then Miss Hargrave appeared. She didn't hesitate. She picked up the lunchbox as if it belonged to her, opened it, and immediately dug in. She didn't even look at the kids around her, just devoured the food like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. But that wasn't the worst part. I in the background, another child was visible. A boy, maybe 8 years old, standing there, clutching his lunchbox tightly. Mr. Dean, the teaching assistant, walked over. I watched as he yanked the boy's lunchbox away, without a word. The boy's hands trembled, but he didn't fight back. He didn't say a thing. The camera captured the moment when a little girl with bright pigtails, clearly terrified, handed her lunchbox over to Mr. Dean. He didn't even ask her. He just took it, like she had no right to it. She stood there frozen, her big eyes wide with fear. My heart sank. This was so much worse than I had imagined. Miss Hargrave wasn't just taking Lena's lunch. She was part of something bigger. A cycle of theft and intimidation happening right under the noses of the parents. I quickly backed up the video in 3 different places. I needed to be prepared. I wasn't going to let this slide, not after everything I'd seen. I wrote an email to the Regional Child Welfare Office, attaching the footage, and printed a formal complaint to make sure I had everything in writing. Then, I drafted a letter to a local journalist. Someone had to know about this. When I went to Lena's room that night, I found her curled up in her blanket, hugging her stuffed bunny, Mr. Cloud. Her little face was pale, her eyes wide with uncertainty. She was holding in so much fear, so much confusion. And for the first time, I realized she wasn't just scared of what was happening at school. She was scared of what might happen to her if she spoke up. "I know," I said, sitting beside her on the bed. "I know what's going on." Her eyes widened. "You saw it." I nodded, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. "And I'm proud of you. I know you were trying to protect me, but now it's my turn to protect you." She bit her lip, eyes welling up. "What happens now, Mom?" We fight back, I said firmly. We end this together. That night, I stayed up late, ensuring every piece of evidence was in place. The next day, I wouldn't be the mother watching from the sidelines. I'd be the mother taking action. Lena left for school, unaware of the storm that was about to break. But I wasn't going anywhere. I stayed in the car, parked across the street, my eyes glued to the windows of Willow Creek Primary, waiting for the day when the truth would finally come to light. And when it did, justice would be served. Miss, I'm really hungry, Lena quietly asked, her voice trembling. But before she could finish, Miss Hargrave cut her off with a cold, threatening glance. The little girl bit her lip, her eyes welling up with tears. A moment later, she nodded in defeat, as if all hope had drained from her. It was at that exact moment that my anger boiled over. This wasn't just about food anymore. Miss Hargrave wasn't simply taking my daughter's lunch. She was using her position to bully innocent children. That I took a deep breath and sat up straighter. The time for just being a concerned mother was over. This was about justice. I wasn't going to sit back any longer, watching my daughter suffer. It was time to act. That evening, I sat on the couch, phone in hand. My fingers hovered nervously over the contacts list. I wasn't sure where to begin, but I knew who to turn to. After a moment of hesitation, I dialed the number. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Hello. Mark, I need your help, I said. My older brother, Mark, was a senior police officer with over 10 years of experience. He wasn't the type to get emotional, but when I sent him the video, I knew he'd understand. A sharp exhale followed before he muttered, "Damn, this is unbelievable." There was a pause before his voice steadied. "We're going to bring this to light. I'll help you." The next morning, I arrived at Willow Creek Primary School earlier than usual. Gone was the passive, worried mother I had been. Today, I was here to demand justice. I walked straight into the main office, where the secretary looked up, surprised by my early arrival. "I need to see Principal Anderson," I said, my voice calm but firm. She blinked, sensing something was wrong, then nodded. "Please wait a moment." A few minutes later, I was escorted into a large room where Principal Anderson and several other administrators were waiting. Mrs. Anderson, a woman in her 50s with neatly styled salt and pepper hair, gestured for me to sit. "What's going on, Mrs. Mitchell?" she asked. I opened my purse, took out a USB drive, and placed it on the table. "I want you to watch this video." The secretary plugged the USB into the computer, and the large screen flickered to life. The video began to play, and as soon as the image of Miss Hargrave opening Lena's lunchbox appeared, I could feel the tension in the room. Everyone's eyes were glued to the screen as they watched Miss Hargrave casually eat the contents of the lunchbox. The voice from the video played clearly. "This is too good to waste." I then heard Miss Hargrave's whisper, "If you tell anyone, I'll put you on the detention list." The room fell into silence. Principal Anderson blinked, her face showing confusion. "A teacher is doing this?" she stammered. Several other teachers looked wide-eyed, their expressions slowly morphing from skepticism to shock. "And that's not all," I continued, my voice steady but colder now. "This isn't just about Lena." I fast-forwarded the video to show another scene, another boy, trembling, watching as his lunch was taken by Miss Hargrave and a teaching assistant. Then I showed the clip of a little girl, her face full of fear, as she listened to Miss Hargrave's threats. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. A man who seemed to be the school supervisor slammed his hand on the table. "This is unacceptable," he shouted. Principal Anderson took a deep breath, her fingers pressing the intercom button. "Call Miss Hargrave in right now." 5 minutes later, the door opened, and Miss Hargrave walked in, exuding the same confidence she always did. But as soon as she saw the expressions on everyone's faces, her steps faltered. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to act calm. Principal Anderson crossed her arms. "We just watched a video, and I think you should watch it too." She turned to face the screen. As soon as Miss Hargrave saw herself eating Lena's lunch on the screen, her face changed. She froze for a second, but quickly regained her composure. I was just following the school's policy," she stammered. "Some lunches aren't nutritious enough. I was just checking them." I let out a dry laugh. "So, you check by eating them all?" Miss Hargrave pursed her lips, but still tried to defend herself. "You don't understand. Some meals don't meet the standards. I was just—" "And what about your threats to the students?" I pressed, hitting play on the audio clip that showed Miss Hargrave's voice saying, "If you tell anyone, I'll put you on the detention list." The room fell into stunned silence. Miss Hargrave opened her mouth, but no words came out. Principal Anderson placed her hands on the table, staring at Miss Hargrave with utter disappointment. "How do you explain eating students' food?" For a moment, I saw Miss Hargrave's mouth open to offer some meaningless excuse, but then she realized she was completely cornered. She lowered her head, her fists clenched in frustration. The silence in the room grew heavy. After a minute, Principal Anderson slowly stood. "Miss Hargrave," she said, her voice cold, "you are fired immediately. Furthermore, I will send this report to the Department of Education to ensure you are never allowed to teach again." I could see Miss Hargrave turn pale, but she didn't protest. The school supervisor stepped forward, his voice firm. "Please leave the school immediately." Miss Hargrave gripped the strap of her purse tightly, turned, and walked out, her shoulders shaking with anger and humiliation. The door slammed shut behind her. Principal Anderson turned to me, still in shock. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm truly sorry for this." I nodded, but my heart still felt heavy. The problem isn't just the apology. The school needs to do something to ensure this never happens again. Principal Anderson took a deep breath and nodded. "We will conduct an official investigation, review the entire system, and work with the parents to ensure no other students are harmed." For the first time in days, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I looked down at the phone in my hand, where the video still remained, a piece of evidence that the truth had finally come to light. And Lena, she wouldn't have to be afraid anymore. That day, I left the school with Lena's hand tightly gripping mine. For the first time in months, she smiled brightly. No more worry. No more fear. The next day, during lunch, Lena opened her lunchbox, and for the first time, ate her lunch peacefully. Watching her happily eat her sandwich, I felt a sense of relief. Not only had I protected my daughter, but I had helped make many other children safer. It was a lesson I would never forget. Not everyone deserves to be a teacher. And sometimes, you have to speak up to protect those who can't protect themselves. Can you believe this? What would you do if you were a parent? Have you ever encountered a teacher with strange behavior? Share your story below. And if you like this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Crazy Neighbor Drama channel to keep following these epic plot twists.